Good evening, friends. Hope you all are keeping well during this challenging and trying times. Thank you for attending the fourth prestigious Dr. Devangana Desai Endowment Lecture 2021 to be delivered soon by Dr. Jamkhedkar on his latest research, Oral Tradition and Medieval History, Sri Renuka of Mahur, a case study. This is a different kind of research where Dr. Jamkhedkar debates and argues for intangible heritage as one of the important sources of information, besides literary and archaeological evidences. The first Dr. Devangana Desai Endowment Lecture was delivered on 18th April 2018 by Dr. R. Nagaswamy on Kailasnath Temple of Kanchipuram. And the second lecture was delivered by Dr. B.N. Goswami on continuity and change, the work of three generations of artists on the great Rashamanjari series of paintings. And the third lecture was delivered last year by our dear friend, senior scholar, Dr. Ashok Das, on sculptural works at the Mughal court. I take this opportunity to express our gratitude to Dr. Devangana Desai for helping us to institute the endowment program at the museum. Dr. Desai is a senior scholar and a trustee of the museum. She envisioned a holistic education that is deeply rooted in our culture and surroundings and also connected to the wider world. The endowment aims at the propagation of research and dissemination of study of ancient, medieval, and pre-modern until 19th century art, archaeology, architecture, culture, and history of India. There are three activities started under this endowment program. The annual Dr. Devangana Desai Endowment Lecture, junior and senior scholarships, and a 3-day art history class once in 2 years. Museums are public-facing collections-based institutions that preserve and transmit knowledge, culture, and history of the past, present, and the future. This places museums in an important position of trust in relation to their audience, local communities, donors, partners, organizations, sponsors, and funders. As a representative of the CSMBS family, I would like to draw your attention that the museum, one of Mumbai's most iconic institutions, will soon be 100 years old. Hope we get the opportunity to celebrate this occasion at the museum next year. Now it's my privilege to introduce our speaker of this evening, whom we all consider as our friend and teacher. It is because of his close association with this institution. Dr. Jamkhedkar is currently chairman of the Indian Council of Historical Research. He joined ICHR as chairman since 2018. He was the chancellor of Deccan College, Pune, and the director of KJ Somaiya Center for South and East Asian Studies. He served as Director of State Archaeology and Museums, Government of Maharashtra, and was the Vice President of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai, and also the editor of the Journal of Asiatic Society of Mumbai for many years. And he is currently member of CSMB's Research Journal editorial team. We always enjoy his argument with Dr. Doshi, Dr. Devangana Desai, on different aspects of art, iconography, and religious conflicts. In fact, these are the scholars who actually taught us to question the past. There are very few scholars question the past, but they are constantly questioning and finding solution, finding new research. Dr. Jamkhedkar has several publications in his name. I just mention a few from the long list. Ajanta, Monumental Legacy, Gazetteers of Maharashtra Volume 2 on History of Maharashtra, Art and Architecture, Architecture 2002. Ambarnath Shivalaya along with Dr. Kumud Kanitkar, Verula Mahatma, and then biography of Bhauda Jilat in Marathi, and a series of joint excavation reports on Pauni, Bhokardan, Naikund, Mardal, etc. Dr. Jamkhedkar received many awards, scholarships, and fellowships. I would like to mention just a few from his profile. Silver Medal of the Asiatic Society of Mumbai, Sri Shiva Chhatrapati Puraskar, Nagpur, V.S. Bendre Puraskar from Maharashtra Itihas Parishad, Kamla Devi Jain Puraskar from Indian Society of Buddhist Studies, New Delhi, and of course, Netherlands Government Senior Fellowship. Beside this, he teaches art and archaeology in universities and institutes all over the country as visiting professor or as an expert. He enjoys teaching art history, architecture, philosophy, religion, and Sanskrit. Many of you don't know that Dr. Jamkhedkar's background is Sanskrit, and he can read and translate original Sanskrit manuscripts. This is a rare quality. Unfortunately, we have a very few living scholars with Sanskrit background. Now over to Dr. Jamkhedkar. Thank you.
Let me first of all express my thankfulness to the members of the Board of Trustees of the Prince of Wales Museum, represented by Dr. Sabyasachi Mukherjee, for inviting me for this very prestigious lecture, which is a result of an endowment given by a scholar of eminence like Dr. Devangana Desai. The earlier speakers, as I know, were great stalwarts in their own fields, like Professor Nagaswamy, then Dr. D.N. Goswami, who is a great art historian of the miniature paintings, then Ashok Das, who specializes in Mughal paintings. And therefore, I am aware of the importance of this lecture series, and I will try my best to come to the taste of the scholars and also the connoisseurs. Today, I am going to talk about altogether different subject, you can say, and that is about the oral tradition and the medieval history. It has so happened that the medieval history, which roughly starts and coincides with the Sultanate and Mughal period in North India and the Deccan, is usually reconstructed on the basis of the records which were very meticulously kept by the travelers who came from outside, many times from West Asia, Iran, and other places connected with Islam, and the courtiers themselves. For example, the Shahnama, which was composed during the period of Akbar, and other Masire Alamgiri. Similarly, the meticulously kept court records of the Deccan also, they have been the main source of the medieval history of the Deccan. But in this, a new approach has been given by persons like R.N. Mehta and Professor M.S. Mate of the Deccan College. Professor R.N. Mehta tried to understand the medieval history from a different angle altogether. If we see the map of India, as we are seeing reproduced from R.N. Mehta's book, the there were Hindu dynasties which were there, like the Paramaras, Chandelas, then the Chalukyas, that is the Solankis of Gujarat, the Yadavas, and the Kakatiyas of Warangal. Then come the Hoysalas. So all these dynasties, the Hindu kingdoms, which succeeded the great Bhoja, you can say, because he was a landmark in the end of the early medieval period, these succumbed to the armies which came from Afghanistan, Central Asia. And they established a different type of rule altogether. I won't go into the details of their rules or the way they ruled or what was their way of ruling people, but I would simply say that the sources totally changed. Before this, we talked in terms of the inscriptions, monuments, and other things. Now we have to talk in terms of the records of the courtiers. But then this history becomes, in a way, one-sided. This has been very well shown by Professor R.N. Mehta. He says that even certain incidents which are very well recorded, for example, the raid by Humayun of Chapaner, which was a very important city in Gujarat, which had a fort. Now, the accounts are so conflicting that it is very difficult to make out what exactly happened and how exactly it happened, in what sequence it happened. Professor Mehta's studies of the Chapaner fort and the folklore also, that is, the traditions which are current in Gujarat, they have shown us that this incident can be very well understood, and also we can know about the city of Chapaner, which hardly had, it was a capital city, which hardly had a life of something like only 100 years. And therefore, we find that he gives another example, and that of the folklore which is connected with Malav Talab and Kalika Mata Temple at Baroda. The folklore about the Kalika Mata Temple is that, well, the Kalika Mata Temple is situated near the you can say the outer walls of the fort at Baroda. Now, Kalika Mata happens to be the tutelary deity of the ruling Gaikwads. How is it that such an important divinity should be at the periphery of the city? So there is a story telling that Gaikwad prayed Kalika Mata to come with him to his residence. She agreed to, but then she had put a usual, you can say, condition that I am following you should not be in any way doubted by you, and therefore if you look back, I will station myself there only. And this is how the location of the Kalika Mata temple on the fort, you can say, Prakara, is explained by the folklore. And with the help of the understanding of the architecture and other thing, he says that it is quite normal that, well, this temple should have been there at its place, but then just to explain the anomaly, a folklore story is there. Same thing was done by Professor M.S. Mate and my own friend, Professor Pati, who was the head of the department in the Marathwada University. They tried to understand the Daulatabad fort and its development. There were earlier explanations given because this was once the capital of the whole India when Muhammad Tughlaq wanted to shift his capital there. But the city was existing even before that at the foot of the hill. And with the help of the explorations and making drawings of the plans of the city, and then trying to understand from the archaeological point of view the development of the fort architecture itself, both these scholars have come to some different conclusions, and they give us a more clear picture of the development of this great city of the Deccan. For example, we'll see that one of the important monuments in this particular fort is called the Jama Masjid, Jami Mosque as it is called. This was built uh, in the times of the Sultanate period and probably in the times of Muhammad Tughlaq itself. And if we see carefully this particular mosque, we'll find that it is in line with all the type of Sultanate architecture that comes up in India when these new rulers, they conquer, establish themselves as sultans and rule the kingdoms which are conquered by them. Their architecture naturally was uh, full of material which was collected out of the ruined and destroyed temples. If we carefully see this particular mosque, we'll find it is a beautiful monument, and that many of the pillars, they have been readjusted to get a particular height. These pillars must have been quite strong and beautiful, but they carry images of Jinnah. And therefore, any intelligent person can make a guess that the Jain temples which are existing in the city of Devgiri, as it was called during the time of Ramadeva Raya, must have had at least 3 temples. That is the intelligent guess made by Professor Mate. And the oral tradition, which is in the form of the Vividha Tirthakalpa, support this particular tradition. We'll see some pictures further. Say these remains, for example, they show on the left a Bhumija temple which was dedicated to Jinnah. We see on the right the Shukanasa representation of the Jinnah. Then there are some Shvetambara images also. Say, for example, they can be made out, for example, the one on the extreme left and one on the extreme right is of the Shvetambara affiliation, not only because of the lower garment the Jinnah wears, but also because of the Srivatsa mark which is there on the chest. But there were some other images which were of the affiliation of the Digambara. Now coming back to our own this is the beautiful monument of the Jami Mosque and its location. And now after exploration, the 2 scholars were able to give us a complete picture as to how on the extreme left, 1 and 2 is the Devgiri Fort, then the Mahakot area, and near that, in between the Kalakot and the main localities which are there. So they have tried to identify the ruined Jain temples which are there in this area. A reconstruction also has been made, conjectural isometric reconstruction, wherein we will find that there are at least 7 temples which are there in the city, which was at the foot of Devagiri before it was attacked and conquered by Alauddin Khilji and his assistant. So the oral tradition is also all this exploration, mapping, and these things. There were other significant contributions which are also made as to when exactly was the moat work, the slope which was acquired. So there are conclusions which have been done on the basis of the architectural and material evidence. Now we'll come to the main part of my lecture, in the sense, unless I tell the legend of Renuka and Parashurama, as also Datta, who happens to be one of the important characters in the legend, we won't be able to understand what exactly was happening in the region of the present Marathwada area of Maharashtra, which was part of the Nizam's dominions before independence. Now the story goes that Renuka and say Jamadagni, they were in their ashram and they were attacked by Sahasrarjuna, who felt insulted that uh, Renuka and Jamadagni did not accede to his request to give him as a gift the cow which was fulfilling all wishes, the Kamadhenu. Now, because of that dastardly attack on Jamadagni, he died. But while protecting him, trying to cover him, Renuka received 21 wounds on her body. And she naturally sought to have the help from her son who was practicing penance on Kailasha. He comes back and then he uh, he comes back and he's very much moved because of the state of his parents. But then he wants to do the funeral ceremonies for his parents, and therefore wants to seek to have some secret or virgin land for this. There is a you can say Akashavani, Devavani as it can be called, that the heavenly voice tells him that you should meet Tantric Yogi Dattatreya and he will perform the ritual. And after the ritual was performed, then it so happens that Parshurama was remembering his parents very much, and therefore they assured him before being put to fire that they will come back after the funeral happens after a month or something like that. But Parshurama in a hurry remembers his mother Renuka only on the 13th day, and therefore she cannot emerge completely, and therefore only the face of Renuka came, which was treated as a śakti-piṭha and worshipped by the followers of Shakti. Now, with this legend is also another thing which is associated that tells us about the origin of a very important religious dance which is performed for all the mother goddesses in Maharashtra. There are 4 mother goddesses. That is, one is Purapur Mahalakshmi, then Pujja Bhavani, who was the tutelary deity of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and the Renuka of Mahur. And the 4th is, you can say, Saptashringa Nivasini. So all these are offered, and it has become a common practice in Maharashtra and in the Deccan to perform this particular dance, not only to appease the mother goddess, invite her for on the auspicious occasion and seek her blessings. And it is called Goṇḍs. Now the origin of this Goṇḍs has been told to us, this ritual dance, which is told to us in 3 adhyayas of the Sahyādri Khanda, which we are studying as an important text. This text belongs roughly to the medieval period. You can say roughly after something like 12th century to about 15th, 16th century will be the date of this text. It has got so many things which have crept in during the course of its development. But this dance of revelry was done by Kali, who assisted the great mother goddess in killing the Chanda and Munda. And that is why she is called Chamunda. Now, after killing Chanda and Munda, she made a dance of revelry, and that is called Goṇḍs or Goṇḍari, and joined by Goṇḍs, that is Bhutaganas, and offerings of liquor and flesh are made. So it has clearly a background of the, you can say, type of worship which is offered to the mother goddess by the people of the forest dwelling areas, or people, you can say, who believe in folklore and other things. Then the musical instruments which are connected with this are also, it is called Chandaka, after Chanda was killed by Kali. and the drum was made from the abdomen of Narakasura, who was killed by Krishna. Now, as the legend tells us, this temple, which was probably first of all destroyed, but then reconstructed in 14th, 15th century, still preserves the face of Renuka. And we'll find that there is a lion below her seat. And when you descend from the hill to the other side of the access to the Renuka temple, we find a temple of Parashurama also. Now, this is the legend which has been told to us. And the sanctity of the place goes on growing. The first character or the important mythical character which is connected with this legend is Datta. Datta somehow has become a very important figure in the medieval period. Though acknowledged already in something like Bhagavata Purana or other Puranas, or even in the epics as one of the avatars of Vishnu. He is the son of Sahyādri. He is an incarnation of Vishnu, sustainer of the world. Then he becomes a tantric siddha. There are so many Upanishads of the later period wherein Avadhuta Gita and other type of Upanishads wherein this aspect of Datta comes forward. And the practitioner of the tantric cults naturally are the practitioners of the five makaras as they are called, and knows for, that is, what are the things which are not to be done by renunciation. The yogi, the third, you can say, transformation or the aspect of Datta which comes forward. So earlier it is simply the incarnation of Vishnu. The second stage, probably right from something like 7th, 8th century AD to about 11th, 12th century AD is the tantric siddha, and then he becomes a simple siddha, that is Avadhuta. There is something like an Avadhuta Gita also, and he is upholder of the Sanatana Dharma. So these are the three stages with the myth of Datta goes through. Datta had a very typical, you can say, appeal in the mind of people belonging to the Deccan, even you can say going beyond up to Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra, Gujarat. These are the places where Datta is worshipped very much. But he is accepted not only in the Sanatana tradition, Tantric tradition, but also other traditions like the Mahanubhavas, who are non-conformist Hindu Vaishnava sect of 12th, 13th century. He is, as already pointed out, he is worshipped by the Tantric sadhakas. He is worshipped also by the Natapanta, which was a great movement which came in order to bring reforms in the Tantric tradition, which flourished from 6-7 to about 1000 AD. Then he is worshipped by the Varkaris also. So he had a great appeal, right from something like the early medieval period to 15th century. We find various references to Datta and being respected. Now he also happens to be the son of Sati Anasuya, wife of Sahyadri, who was again daughter of Sage Kapila, the propounder of Sankhya philosophy. Now the various monuments which are connected. As it should be noted that some of these monuments, they were destroyed probably in the medieval period and reconstructed. Herein is we are visiting the place where Anasuya Mata Mandir is there, wherein uniconically also said Jamadagni has been, Atri has been represented. Similarly, nearby are the parents of Anasuya, that is Kapila and Devahuti. Datta is also connected with the Merwala lake, which is there at the foot of the legendary Meru Parvata, which has been identified as the first creation of Brahma in this particular place. And there are 7 rivers which come from this, and they gather into a pool called Meru Alaya. Now, Datta was very much associated with Meru Alaya, and there is a place where the Mahanubhavas identify him to be identify him to be resting at this particular place. So it is called the Nidrasthana. Now there are so many monuments which have been referred to, or the tirthas which have been referred to in the Sahyadri Khanda or the Amali Grama Mahatmya, that is the Mahur Mahatmya. Now all the gods somehow get associated with this great place, and therefore Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh, Datta in the form of Vishnu, in the form of Devadeveshwara, that is Sheshashai Vishnu, which was supposed to be located in the Datta Ashrama, which is identified with Datta Shikhara, is there. But there are places like this Alanda Vapi, which is associated with both Shiva and Brahma, because of that great act of Shiva cutting off the fifth head and practicing penance, and Brahma, before creating the world, practicing penance and being given a boon by the Devadeveshwara. Now these monuments, they have been repaired from time to time. This is Alanda Vapi or Sudarshana Vapi. Then, as I told you, Shiva is again connected in a different way. A part of that new Meru, which is identified having 3 peaks, one of the peaks is called the Kailash Tekri. And there is a small monument which is there. There are legions associated with it, and therefore it is sanctified even for the followers of Shiva. Then there is Jamkhedkar who is there. Now this is a very peculiar, you can say, deity. He is called also Bhutanatha. As we know, Goṇḍs is for the dance of the Bhutas who are presided over by Kali or Chandi. He is, according to the Goṇḍ religion, supposed to be the son of Mahakali of Chandrapur. So all these places, they get connected with each other. So all the 3 gods are there. Meru is there. Then the place of resting of Datta and Devadeveshwara is there. There are pilgrimages which are associated in which all these important places they figure. Now, there is something like a Saptakrosha Yatra. The Muralidar, which is in the center, as you can see it, that is the place where Renuka Temple is there. We had already seen the image of that. And on the 4 sides, there are gateways which are supposed to be to this great holy place. The 4 dwaras, as they are called. So, one is the Kapeshwara, which is to the north, Hatakeshwara, which is to the east, and then Vimaleshwara, which is to the south, and Dhurjati, which is to the west. Now, these temples are very much there. If you see carefully the architecture of these temples, you will find that Kapeshwara is built in somewhat Maratha period. The sculpture also shows it like that. The original must have been destroyed, and therefore it was probably rebuilt in 15th, 16th century AD. Hatakeshwara is in the form of a cave temple, and now it is converted as Farid Baba, Sheikh Farid Baba's shrine. Vimaleshwara is most important from our point of view because it is a Yadava period temple. So all this concept of this yatra, Saptakrosha Yatra, goes at least back to the Yadava period, as the plan of the temple, as also the pillar and other architectural features they show. This is definitely a temple of 12th, 13th century. The Dhurjati is very important because all these temples are associated with some pond or a vapi, that is a natural pond, or you can say constructed stepwell. So these are the 4 gates which are at a distance of each other by something like 21 kilometers. We have now tried to identify many. There are, the legend says that there are something like 9 crores of tirthas in the Mahur Kshetra, as it is called, this holy region. But we have been able to identify, earlier scholars also have done the work on that, but we have actually been able to find out with the help of local people some monuments there, and this is going to tell us the history of the of the uh, of the place itself and that place. You see, as I told you, Renuka is part of one of the concept of Shakti-piṭha. She is also part of the Shakti-piṭhas which have been 51 Shakti-piṭhas which have been described in the Shakti Sangama Tantra of 16th, 17th century AD, and the Shakti-piṭha, 108 Shakti-piṭhas which have been enumerated in the Devi Bhagavata, which is many times dated roughly from 9th to 11th century AD. So the legend goes back to that period. So these are the various temples which are associated with the Shakti-piṭhas in Maharashtra. The Mahalakshmi Korapur temple, she is taken to be one of the Shaktis. And Tulja Bhavani, as I mentioned, was tutelary deity, is tutelary deity of the Chhatrapati line, which is still there, and Renuka at Mahur, and Saptashringi Vani, Nasik. So she is not the main, and therefore we say that there are 3.5 Shakti-piṭhas in Maharashtra. Now this place is associated with various rishis also. As I told you, Datta's parents, Atri and Anasuya, Datta was born here according to the legend, and therefore there is one Shikhara which is there, Anasuya Mata Shikhara, wherein the temple of Atri and his ashrama is there. The Sheikh Farid Baba Dargah, which is there, and Sheikh Salli Baba Dargah, which is there, and it was known as it's supposed to be the place where Vasuki's ashrama was there, because the river Vanjara, present river Vanjara, has been referred to as Bhogavati. That is the river which goes to the netherworld, and therefore Vasuki's ashrama is there. Now, this being a holy region, it has got Antardwaras, that is the inner gates and the outer gates. Naturally, this being a great Pitha, so the Mula Pitha is there in the center, that is the shrine of Renuka, and then in the north, its Dwara is at Prayag. In the east is Dwara is the Jagannatha temple at Puri. Then its south Dwara is at Srirangam, and its west Dwara is at Dwarka. We'll find that there is some logic in understanding or locating these inner and outer gates of Mahur Kshetra. She is herself, it is itself a Shakti-piṭha. Then the inner Dwaras are all associated with Shiva temples. Outer Dwaras are connected with Vishnu. So it is an amalgamation of the different type of, you can say, traditions which are associated with different agamas. So Shaivas are there, Vaishnavas are there, and Shaktas definitely are there, and Brahma naturally is associated, though not worshipped in the image form. Next. We'll come to now from this oral tradition which gives us the background, as also the origin of the religious dance which is called Goṇḍs in Marathi and Gondali Nritya in Sanskrit, has its own tradition, and a lot of work has been done on this by great scholars like R.C. Dere and so many others. For example, Radha Vallabh Tripathi has worked on the different dance forms, and therein Gondali Nritya forms quite a good substantial space of 6 to 7 pages. And this dance is not only a simple folk dance or religious dance, but it has got an importance and has become worth being mentioned in the text connected with Sangeeta. That is Sangeeta in Sanskrit meaning all the performing arts, music, dance, and you can say singing. So instrumental music, singing, and dance. All these three together are called Sangeeta in Sanskrit. So we'll find that this Gondali Nritya, as earlier referred to, has been described in 3 chapters in the Amali Krama Mahatmya, 34 to 36. And it has, as I told you, those scholars have worked from the historical point of view. Here, from the legendary and folklore point of view, the origin has been traced to Chandika or Kali, who is one of the 8 mothers who helped the great mother in vanquishing the Asuras. This dance, as I told you, the antiquity of the Shakti-piṭha at least goes to 9th-10th century. The Goṇḍali dance also must have originated initially at Mahur only and specifically connected with Renuka, because the Amali Grama Mahatmya very clearly tells us like that. And this finds naturally mentioned in some of the Sangita Shastra texts, that is the texts which are connected with performing arts. Now, Goṇḍali dance is a regional or Deshi dance, different from the Margi or the classical group of dances like Bharatanatyam, Odissi or Kathakali. So, it does form and is described. Then there are other types of Deshi dances. There is one differentiation between the Margi and Deshi, and it is that well, Bharatanatyam Shastra gives us very detailed, you can say, instructions and suggestions regarding as to when different types of dances should be done. Dance can be part of the drama performance also. Similarly, dance can be part of the worship of the god, as Bharatanatyam and Odissi are. But then these regional dances, they were different in that they didn't have the basic thing of conveying the bhava. They were definitely dance practices and they had their own aesthetic appeal. But the bhava and abhinaya were absent in that. So this is the way the classical, you can say, Pandits who study the dance forms describe it to us. There is another dance form of the Deshi type, and that is Prerani and Prekshana also, which have been referred to in the literature not only in Sanskrit but also in early, you can say, medieval Marathi literature. Now, Prerani and Goṇḍali, those dance forms have a religious background in that they are to be performed at the festival of Bhuta Mata. As I conjecture, this Bhuta Mata is nobody else than Kali or Chandika or Chamunda. All the Bhutas are surrounding her, and Prerani dance, which is still practiced, which has been described in the Skanda-purāṇa and being practiced at Prabhasa Kshetra, there, in order to show those different types of ghauls, or you can say ghosts, masks were used, and these were to please the Bhuta Mata. So it has got a popular origin. And Jayasena, who is one of the generals of the Kakatiya king of 13th century CE of Andhra Pradesh, describes in his treatise on music the Goṇḍali Nritya as of Karnataka origin. And he tells us the story as Someshwara III, who belonged to 12th century. In his court, he arranged during the festival of Bhuta Mata a dance of Goṇḍali Nritya, as it is called, performed by Billi, a tribal woman, and explains that in Maharashtra Bhasha, Billi means a Goṇḍali, a Goṇḍ woman. This is very significant. So, as this particular part, that is Mahur and the nearby area, was part of the later Chalukyan king, naturally, from the contemporary times or point of view, this will be of Karnataka origin, because the ruler was later Chalukyan Karnataka king. But as Jayasena himself says, that in Marathi, Billi, Goṇḍali iti Maharashtra Bhashaya. So Goṇḍali is the word which was used in Maharashtra. So if the Goṇḍali, who was the performer, that is the Goṇḍ woman who was the performer of this dance, was called Goṇḍali, and for Sanskrit literature, you can say, it has been translated in Sanskrit as Billi. So we'll find that this was definitely connected with the Goṇḍs who were ruling right from something like 8th century, as their tradition tells us, in the Goṇḍwana area, which expanded from the banks of Narmada to the banks of Krishna. So this area was called as Goṇḍwana, and therefore this has got a folk origin in Maharashtra and tells us a lot of the history of the Goṇḍs and their assimilation in the Hindu society. That particular process has been something like explained by this Goṇḍali Nritya. Goṇḍali or Goṇḍal. Goṇḍali is the performer of Goṇḍal in Marathi, and Goṇḍal is the actual dance. There are references right from Leela Charitra, 13th century work of the Mahanubhavas, which talks about Goṇḍal being performed at the Datta temple, which we had shown as the Nidra Sthana of the Mahanubhavas. There, Datta was worshipped with Goṇḍala dance. So it was quite a common practice. Then Goṇḍalis are dancers along with Bhutyas. Again, this name is very significant because Goṇḍala dance is done in connection with Bhutamata Mahotsava. So those who dance are called Bhute. So now the performers are called Bhutyas. They have got the rights to perform worship for the devotees who come there. It is not the Brahmins, but the Bhutyas will be performing. They are the actual worshippers, agents of worship for the persons who come from different castes. And therefore we will find that they are like shamans. And therefore its history, if it is traced, we'll be amazed that there are Goṇḍalis of different castes. And these Goṇḍalis, they perform dances and worship also for their different castes. And they are spread all over, you can say, eastern and western Maharashtra. These castes are in different, you can say, strata of the society, Maratha, Mahas, monks, and so many others. It is a beautiful representation of the Goṇḍala dance on one of the Khandova temples at Hindengarh, which was built by a Jain. So we will understand how the appeal of Goṇḍala dance was so much pervading. And a Jain patron building a temple of Khandova and depicting especially the Goṇḍala dance. If you see it carefully, in the middle there is a person with a stringed instrument, and there are persons who are playing upon cymbals and others. There are persons who are dancing, and there is the goddess to the left, who is the Bhavani. So we'll find that this institution is very much important, not only from the religious point of view, but also from the cultural point of view. As I told, probably, as the name suggests, it was Goṇḍali, and Goṇḍali, as I have tried to reconstruct, Gondu in Andhra Pradesh is the name for the Goṇḍs. Its plural will be Gondulu. Like, for example, Panta is a respected school teacher. Pantulu, while referring to him, we call him Pantulu. But the plural also means the tribe, as in Sanskrit. For example, Kuru, Kuravaha. And Kuru is the name of the dynasty, the king, as also the tribe. So we'll find Goṇḍali will be the Goṇḍ woman. And if we see the dance of the Maria Goṇḍs and the Goṇḍs themselves, as you can see in these pictures, that they specifically wear the crown or a gear head, you can say headgear, decorated with cowrie shells. Then they wear, you can say, necklaces of, and the legend tells us that you can wear armbands as also anklets made of cowrie shells. So this is very auspicious. There is a complete legend of, you can say, Kapar the Asura was killed by Parashurama, and he brought these cowrie shells to Renuka Mata. She was very pleased, and she advised all her worshippers to wear them because they destroy all the sins. So here in an aboriginal tradition, being accepted in the main, you can say, Hindu tradition, getting assimilated and getting religious significance. We'll have to understand, and this part of my lecture will be emphasizing the process of Hinduization of the Goṇḍs. As we see that these Goṇḍs, that is not, they don't refer themselves to as Goṇḍs. It is the name given by the surrounding, you can say, urban people, that is Hindus. That is how one of the anthropologists has described that the Hindus call themselves, Hindus call these tribes, they are different tribes and collectively called Goṇḍs. Their language is also called as Goṇḍi, and people have worked on the grammar, vocabulary, and a dictionary is also there, which very clearly says that they have got a South Indian affiliation. It belongs to the Dravidian family. Their origin is somewhere in Andhra Pradesh. They call themselves as Toi-Ur themselves, and the kings of these different chiefs from the different tribes who ruled up to something like 17th, 18th century call themselves as ruling the Goṇḍwana. That is the whole area right from Narmada to Krishna. And therefore the whole area which was otherwise ruled, supposed to have been ruled during the Hindu kings by the Kakatiyas, the Yadavas and others. The Maurya Goṇḍs, as I referred to, were the crowns of the cowrie shells and waistbands of cowrie shell also. And the Amaligrama Mahatmya supports this particular type of construction. Coming back to the history of the Goṇḍs, there is an inscription at Ramnagar of 16th century, which tells us in that inscription there are 56 rulers who preceded that king. And that king says that we have got 56 rulers who were there, so their antiquity can go back, well back to something like 6th, 7th century. And they themselves believe and tell the genealogy in different areas, right from, for example, at Chandrapur, 7th, 8th century AD. But they are, as you see, there is an inscription near Ramnagar, near Jabalpur, at a place called Vishnupur. It is called so because a Vishnu temple was established by one of the Goṇḍ kings under the patronage of one of the Goṇḍ kings who gave an agrahara for it. They have built temples at Chandrapur, for example, like Muralidar, Ram, Shiva, and Mahakali, of course, which is their patron deity, and of Ekavira, which is supposed to be her sister, that is Renuka of Mahur. So we'll find that there are customs also which are connected. For example, when pilgrims go from Chandrapur to Mahur, they carry a set of presents which is meant for a married woman. That is, you can say sari, bangles, and other things. And they carry it from Chandrapur and offer it to Ekavira, who is her sister. Then Bhutanatha, who is the son of Mahakali, has an important place and temple at Mahur. So we'll find that these are some of the indications, very clear indications, wherein we'll find that they are being Hinduized. The process of Hinduization must have started sometime in 9th century and it continued, and it continues, you can say. It is worthy of mention that the fort of Mahur was built by the Goṇḍ kings and was defended against the Sultanates and Mughals by them, but then ultimately it was taken over by the Bhoslas of Nagpur. As I was trying to explain, that the Goṇḍs not only tried to trace their ancestry back to something like 6th, 7th century. If we calculate that every generation roughly gets something like, every king gets roughly something like 13 to 17 years for his rule. As the Ramnagar inscription shows, that the Goṇḍs were trying to establish that where we belong to this region and we have been here for last 56 generations. There is another evidence of the process of Hinduization, as it is called by the famous scholars who studied the Jagannath cult, that is Harman Gumke, G.C. Tripathi and Anna. These told that during the later medieval period, even in the early medieval period, there was an expansion which came up in the spread of the urban people. In fact, it is described in a negative manner by persons like D.D. Kosambi, saying that it is feudalism, because of the loss of money economy, people are going to villages. It has been described by M.K. Dhaurikar as the de-urbanization process. He doesn't call it feudalism. He doesn't give any, you can say, historical significance to it from that point of view. He simply described that people started dispersing. That is correct. But then, this has been counter-argued by persons like Brijlal Chattopadhyay, saying that, well, this is a process wherein so many new chieftains, they come up from, not exactly from the urban background, but from aboriginal background, and they want to have legitimization. So all these Puranas, different types of inscriptions, they are evidence of this particular process. And therefore, this process is called something like Hinduization. So herein we will find that in this inscription of Vishnupura, now Dalapata is the king, is the Goṇḍ king. Dalapata Sahi Rajye, Chandrapati Thakura, he is establishing a consecrating an image of Vasudeva, and there is an agrahara which has been given by the patron. So we'll find that here there is a clear patronage which has been given in somewhat 1606, that is, you can say, mid of the 15th century, because if we take out the 57 years, it becomes the mid of the 16th century. So at that time, they have already started patronizing. And if we see now, for example, besides that list which has been given in the Ramnagar inscription, now Lucy Smith has reconstructed from the regional oral tradition of the Goṇḍs the genealogy of the Goṇḍ kings at Chandrapur. He starts that Bhim Ballal Singh must have been there in something like 9th century, 870 AD, he says. So this is again very significant because the date of the Devi Bhagavata is 9th century. So this process must have started, as this genealogy also shows, sometime in the 9th century AD. And there is a complete, you can say, continuation. And their names also, Bhima Ballal Shah. Then this is Surja Ballal Singh. Now Ballal is a very important word according to me. Babji Ballal Shah. So everybody is calling the Ballal name, seems to be very popular. And just to remind the scholars here and the connoisseurs who are sitting, I would explain the meaning of Ballal. In fact, the Arab travelers referred to the Rashtrakutas as Ballara because their famous title was Vallabha. And from Vallabha is derived, Vallabha Raja is derived Ballara. And Ballala is a very common name among modern times also, up to the last generation, very common name. So I would again say that this name Ballal itself shows the influence of the Rashtrakuta kings. And it in a way indirectly very supports our conjecture that this whole process must have started during the Rashtrakuta times. As they say, the last ruler is 1735 to 51, Nilakanta, who was probably defeated by the Bhosles. Next one. Now, herein I am trying to show the various areas which are being ruled by the Ballal or these Goṇḍ kings and what was their extent. You will find that there are different parganas which have been described in their documents, that is archival records, and there are different names also. There are at least something like 34 divisions which are there, and many of these had forts also, and that can tell you what is the importance of these kings. They were referred to as zamindars, but they were chieftains in their own way and had built so many forts, had armies, and very successfully many times fought back the sultans and the Mughal kings. Next one. Now, here are some of the temples. Just to show the material evidence, I would show that they were not only prone to worship different Hindu gods, but they also adapted themselves. They built themselves different temples. For example, the Ajale Temple, which has got a very legendary and mythical significance among the Goṇḍs of Chandrapur, because Ajale was built over or in memory of a legend which is connected with Champatanath or Bhutanath. And that was a very important divinity for the Chandrapur kings. Now, this is a temple which has been built in the fashion of the, you can say, Maratha style, which was prevalent in 16th, 17th or 18th century. Then there are colossal images. These images were patronized by a local merchant trader who had his origin from Andhra Pradesh. And we find that there, Andhra Pradesh had a lot of things to do with Goṇḍs, because their origin was in Andhra Pradesh. So many merchant communities, they came, and these are called the counties in eastern Vidarbha. So they have definitely their origin in that area. And their ministers were Telangi Brahmins who have their surnames ending in Var. Say, for example, Somalwar, Elkunchwar, and so many others who have settled, and they are respected Brahmins. They were their ministers. And therefore, if the ministers are Brahmins, these kings had ministers who were Brahmins, then the community which is there, who supported their economic and financial aspects, these are also Hindus, and therefore this process of assimilation must have done or got a momentum with all these incidents. Now, here is the famous Mahakali Temple. It is still a very important divinity for the Goṇḍ kings who are there, and so we'll find that there is now a section who previously ruled as the chieftains of the Goṇḍs in different areas. They call themselves as the Rajgoṇḍs. And here is a temple, again representative of the Maratha style, with four, you can say, small kutas or small shrines, and in the middle, the spire coming out instead of a dome. There is an image of Mahakali, which is in the Central Museum, Nagpur, and that has been done in Jaipur, you can say, marble. So the Jaipur artists also must have contributed a lot to the Goṇḍ art. The example which I gave of the Hinduisation temple, there also the Rajasthani sculptors must have contributed. Here is the Muralidar Temple, done in typical, you can say, Hemadpanthi style or the Yadava style, as it is called. And for that, I'm not able to give you a color slide, you can say, but if you can make out very distinction, the middle portion is of the red chanda stone, and the portion above and below it are of the yellow sandstone. And in this Muralidar Temple is again constructed by one of the royal figures of Chandrapur. They assimilated themselves not only in the religious matters but also in the secular matters. They built forts, and if you see these forts, they are not at all different from the contemporary forts of the sultans or the Maratha chieftains. This is the fort from Sekpur. Similarly, there are funerary monuments. For example, in the middle at Chandrapur, there is a special area. Now, it is not a coincidence again that the Nagpur Bhosla cenotes, which are at Nagpur, and these cenotes, they are very much similar. So the Goṇḍs were trying to not only assimilate themselves from point of view of religious beliefs and other things, but also in other aspects of culture, urban culture, that is, you can say, the secular as also the religious architecture. Here is again the Jatpur gate at Chandrapur. It is very clearly a medieval, you can say, entrance or gateway. Next one. Now these are the colossal sculptures, as I can tell you. These were patronized or costume made by a trader, a very wealthy trader. Somehow these could not be put in their proper place, but they are lying in one compound, as you can say, provided for them. Is Matsyavatara, Kurmavatara, then here is Garuda, who has been shown. Ganesha is there in the background, and similarly Durga Mahishamardini also is there. Yes. Most important, again coming back to one more important point, I have been telling you that the Goṇḍs have their origin basically in Andhra Pradesh. And you will be surprised to know that Jadba was one of the Goṇḍ kings. He had minted his own coins in silver as also gold. And in that, he very proudly mentions that he belongs to the Pulastya Vansha, and that part of the legend on the coin has been done in Telugu characters. So it shows not only their origin, but they were very proudly say that they are the descendants of Pulastya Muni, whose two sons are known to us. At least three sons are known to us. That is Ravana, Vibhishana, and the third one was responsible for the killing of so many monkeys in the army. So they say that we belong to the Pulastya Vansha. It should be mentioned that in Hindu mythology, Vibhishana is one of the 7 Chiranjivas. He has an important place. So they very proudly say that they are connected with him. Next one. See, after trying to understand the legend or the myths and legends which have been told in the Amali Grama Mahatmya, we realize that there are 3 or 4 important legendary figures which feature and are to be met every now and then when we move around in Mahur, when we hear about the stories and legends which have been told in the local Marathi literature, contemporary medieval literature, and the myths which are current among the people. These are Renuka, Parashuram, and Dattatreya. Renuka, as I told you, is depicted as a sati, and she ascends the funeral pyre along with her dead husband and consigns herself to the flames of fire. This is what is usually referred to as committing sati. She is actually, so sati was one of the best ideas, and the word sati used in the case of Renuka, which was true in her own way, is very significant because the śakti-piṭhas are associated with different parts which fell in different parts of India, and these are the 51 śakti-piṭhas. For example, for Kamakhya, it was the Guhyanga of Sati which fell there. And this way, so this Pitha gets a double, you can say, force because it is associated with Sati, who is Renuka, And the legend tells us that Renuka and Jamkhedkar are incarnations of Parvati and Shiva, and Parshurama is their son. So we'll find that this Shakti-piṭha, which emerges from something like 9th century CE, is a clear indication because of its association, and the origin of Goṇḍwana is specifically at Renuka. And it has been told to us in the Amaligrama Mahatmya. No such legends associated, though Goṇḍwa is associated with rest of the three śakti-piṭhas, it is with Renuka that the Goṇḍwa dance is associated. And it is a clear indication from what we have seen with the evidence in the form of monuments and legends and so many other things, that the process of Hinduization starts with the local mother goddess being called as, for example, Kali, and also Renuka, and Mahakali, who is the territorial deity. According to one of the legends current among the Goṇḍs, their origin, or the first, you can say, Purusha, or the originator of their clan was Kankali Kali. So we'll find that this process is going on. Another figure is Parshurama, which is very significant according to me. Parshurama, as the legends see it right from Mahabharata, he is connected with the eastern coastal strip where Mahendra Parvata is there, and Dharmaraja is told by Dhamma Rishi, who is his acharya during the exile, tells this that Parshurama lives at Mahendra Parvata. And the region is clearly differentiated, that after Odisha, he says that there is this Vaitarani river, and beyond this, nobody lives, and Parshurama lives here. Then Dharmaraja goes along the eastern coast, he goes to the tip and then comes up, and in the again western strip, he is connected with Parshurama. The Bhrigu Rishi's ashrama is there, Ruchika's ashrama is there at Sopara. It has been described in the Vana-Parvan. And the legend is very clear that the whole Konkan area is called Parshurama Bhumi. The legend being that Parshurama, when exiled by Kashyapa from the earth which was given to him, or the area which was given to him, made a new region of Konkana by putting his arrow and asking the sea to go back. So Parshurama is connected always with regions which are not urbanized. The same story is told in Kalika-purāṇa also. So I will say now emphatically that wherever Parshurama goes, Parshurama is the sign of urbanization being brought in non-urban areas of Bharatavarsha. So Parshurama's legend is very important from that point of view. Similarly important is the figure of Dattatreya. Dattatreya, as I told you earlier, is the son of Atri and Anasuya. Now, Amaligrama Mahatmya says that he was born at Mahur itself. Otherwise, Atri's ashrama is somewhere in the Gangetic plain. Anasuya is also there. They are referred to in the Puranas as also the epics. But then they specifically come here, and because of the Datta cult which has become popular, as I told you, in Western India as also in the Deccan. So Datta myth is always there. Datta, as I explained to you, is known among the Mahanbhavas. He is worshipped by the Tantrika Siddhas. He is worshipped by the Varkaris. He is worshipped by the Nathapantis. So he has got an appeal, and therefore there are three incarnations which are there of Datta in the Deccan. And all these, they tell us that Datta in a way was a yogi, becomes part of the Tantric cults, again an indication of assimilation of the forest dwelling communities and their beliefs into the religious traditions of India, that is Buddhism and Hinduism, because the Tantric aspect of Buddhism and Tantric aspect of Hinduism tells us that they come up during the time of this early medieval period, And that is the process of urbanization, as I understand it. So Datta represents Tantric Hinduism, then Orthodox Hinduism of Smritis and Puranas, and he is also part of the popular Hinduism. And this way we'll find that this Purana in a way represents the follower of Hinduism who is not exactly the most orthodox, that is the sacrificial tradition, the Mimamsa tradition. He is also not part of the Agama tradition, that is the Bhagavata or the Sattva tradition, then the Shaiva, Agamas and other things. He is the person who is of not these two groups, and a person who has been newly introduced, like the Goṇḍs, into the Hindu, you can say, society and world. So this way we'll find that naturally for such a type of person, the holy places of Renuka is naturally a great mother goddess. So these popular Hindus or the common Hindus, they worship Shakti, they worship Vishnu, they worship Shiva, they worship Ganesha, they worship also Kumara. So these are the 5 Agama traditions. They worship them, but then they are still not the Agama followers. They are still not the traditional Orthodox Hindus represented by the sacrificial tradition. So this is the common Hindu, and the Amaligrama Mahatmya tells us how culturally the Goṇḍs were assimilated, how the common Hindu, his religion was associated with these Tirthakshetras and the visit to these places, which assured him not only of heaven but also of peace. Gentlemen and ladies, it was a privilege for me to give this lecture, Devangana Endowment lecture, and I hope I'm trying to understand the medieval history from the point of view of, you can say, the oral tradition, and in the light of the various aspects of archaeology, that is art and architecture, and performing arts, and music, and other institutions like Goṇḍwana. Thank you very much again. I thank the trustees as also the Director General of the Prince of Wales Museum for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts which have come from my studies in the recent 8 or 10 years. I thank also the Asiatic Society, which had asked me to take up this job of critically editing the manuscripts connected with Sahyadri, which are in their collection. Thank you very much.